I'm Corbett Wall with EV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, February the 24th. We're still up here in Montana, mainly for the winter thaw event that we had over the weekend. It was a really good weekend there. Had some time between events there to travel around a little bit. Got to go out to Springdale, Montana, and see my good friend Jim Felton at the Felton Angus Ranch, and hung out with him one afternoon. Went along on a bull delivery over to Livingston, Montana at the old Hare Ranch, and beautiful scenery around there. I tell you what, nice people, and they showed us their cattle and have a really unique old school but works really good auger and belt system there that they feed their cattle with. Some big harvest store silos, and kind of a neat deal to take a look at and check that out. Also got to go down to Crowley, Wyoming, and check out my ranch. My friend Brett Crosby with beefbasis.com, and had a good visit with them and his family. But going to be in Miles City, Montana at the sale barn, and after the sale on Tuesday, giving another talk there before I head back. But I tell you what, at that winter thaw event put on by U.S. Cattlemen's Association, also in association with Montana Stock Growers and Montana Farmers Union, they had a good crowd there, had some important people. They had USDA Undersecretary there over Ag Marketing Service and FSIS, and you know, you got to get those kind of people to the meetings, and so they can see what people are excited about and what people think needs to be done to try to save this industry that we call the cattle business. And I tell you what, people, we are really at a crossroads right here. We continue to see our negotiated cash dwindling and dwindling. We have no leverage in the market to speak of. When times are good, we can't take advantage of it and get the market position high enough. And whenever supplies get heavier or outside things come and affect the market in a negative way, it just drops. It just drops and dumps. And we can't seem to get it back up, and I tell you what, we're in for a long future here of kind of misery as we continue to dwindle out. And you know, I'm just a market guy. I can't save this deal, but I do have a platform here because so many of you people have come to watch this report regularly, and I've got a big passion for this industry and this cattle business, and I hate to see it go down the tubes. And I don't know very many people that can talk about the chicken or hog market for a living and enjoy it. And it looks like we're headed that way, guys. But you know, we look at things that maybe we can do to try to help, but I'm not sure if we're going the right way. We've got a lot of people that are really passionate about mandatory country of origin labeling. That would be great. You know, if we could encourage people to buy U.S. beef and know for sure that it is U.S. beef and it wasn't grown somewhere else and brought in or slaughtered somewhere else and just brought in and repackaged, and you know, that would be great. This U.S. Beef Integrity Act would take care of a lot of that. It wouldn't specify where the product was coming from, but it would tell you whether it is or it ain't U.S. beef, and that would be good too. But neither one of those two things necessarily mean that cattle are going to bring more. Likely it would just be a larger margin for your packers to enjoy as they would continue to hold back the cattle market. We recently talked about at the NCBA meeting, the working committees there had talked about the reauthorization of mandatory price reporting, and maybe we can get more information on the formula sales that make up the bulk, the lion's share by far of your fat cattle sales. And maybe we could get more transparency there, you know. And then you've got your corporate feeders that they've established these formula deals, and that's the way they're being profitable and holding their business together. You know, that's their confidentiality that we may be abusing there if we do that. So as much as we would like something like that to help, it doesn't necessarily mean that cattle are going to bring any more. We're going to have any more leverage in the market. And some of us got together at the meeting at the winter thaw meeting in Billings, Montana this past weekend, and it looks like the one thing that we could get together with. It doesn't just have to be U.S. cattlemen's. We can get RCAF involved. We could get NCBA involved. We could get state associations involved. Your grassroots outfits. We could get everybody involved in this thing if we just we started getting behind one issue and pushing together and trying to get something done about it. I think the thing that we need to do is we need to set a minimum requirement for these bigger packers to buy negotiated cash cattle. And you think, well, how's that going to work? Well, mandatory price reporting has been around about 20 years. Before, it wasn't mandatory that packers had to tell what they had been purchasing or what the price was, what the deals were, and then they made that rule, got it passed, got it pushed through, and then for the last 20 years they've had to report all their purchase information since the last time that they reported, and it hasn't really brought that much change. We do know a lot about the markets on things and on your dressed meat and your pork and the other products that fall under mandatory price reporting, but it hasn't helped with our trade issues at all. But if we set a minimum requirement of negotiated cash, and it's very logical, guys. You talk about, you look at some of your other things like your CME cash feeder cattle index. It has to have a minimum amount of volume in there to be used to settle that feeder board, and they continue to make changes on that, trying to keep more volume in there because they need people to have trust in it. Well, that's logical that we'd have a minimum requirement of negotiated cash with all these formula cattle, all these bid or grid cattle selling off of that one way or the other. And you think, well, they're not necessarily priced off of that. It comes into play. That cash, either the weighted average, the high for the week, something about our limited negotiated cash trade comes into play on almost all of these arrangements. And so, it ought to have enough bite to it to be true and honest if we're going to use it in a fair trade practice. And I think it's something that we need to do. You think, well, how much do we need? Well, let's negotiate on that. If all your associations got together and decided that this is something we need to do, we took it to our representatives and told them we need this to save the industry, to save the way of life of millions of people across the United States, to save the way we're doing things. Otherwise, this deal, we're in a down spiral. We're going down all the time. We're at a crossroads right here. We need to do something. I think it's a good thing that we could get behind. Your formula people would like it too, because they're going to get to take advantage of the leverage in the market that your cash sellers are able to get. I think there'll be more negotiated cash sellers of fat steers and heifers come into play every week. Right now we're killing roughly about 500,000 fat steers and heifers every week, and we rarely break 100,000 negotiated sales. We're usually somewhere between 50 and 75,000, and it's continuing to get so small that we've got to do something. At what point are we going to completely give up on it, and then everybody's just a contract guy? Or do all the independent cattle feeders get out and there's just maybe a dozen corporate feed yards that are actually feeding cattle, and so then what's that going to do to our feeder cattle market with no competition there? And then your cow-calf guys can't survive. They can't keep their ranches. We've got to think about this and do something, and I hope that more people will get behind something like this. And it's not my place to push these issues, but I'm just passionate about it, and I'd like to see the way of life for cattle raisers and cattle producers and cattle feeders and the like And it's not that we're trying to put packers out of business by any means. I mean, they need to survive too, but if they had to buy a minimum amount of negotiated cash sales every week, it would sure make it easier. People would quit puking cattle, on a down market, or basis jumpers wouldn't be so quick to cut loose, and it would just be a great deal. But that's my 2 cents on that. I hope you guys, kind of think about that, and when you hear more about it, or you see it, or you're talking to your friends and neighbors, bring that up to it and see what they think about it. The issues that were happening late last week, a cattle on feed report come out, pretty friendly. I don't know if you can call it really bullish, but it was pretty friendly, neutral to friendly there. But your actual on-feed inventories for February 1st come in at 102.1, a pinch lighter than what most of your guesses were and what the average of the analyst guess was at 102.3. Your placements in January actually come in lighter, so that was great, even lighter than the same report last year. So that was a pleasant surprise there, but that number was 99.8 compared to 101.5, which was the average of the analyst guess. Your marketings was right in there, real tight, near 101, 101% of the same report last year. So that was good. Now, do you think that's going to give the board a shot in the arm and we're going to have higher prices this week? I doubt it, because we also had news come in that Brazil has been okayed to start bringing their beef into us again. Not cattle, but their processed meat can come in, and that's going to make it easier for these packing facilities to come up with grinding product and things like that. They brought that in before, but about 2 years ago we stopped them, but that's negative news. And people that play the board are going to push down on it, and I wouldn't be surprised if your board wasn't down significantly on Monday, at least for a while, despite the fundamentals that we have and the good things that are going on in the market. It's just it's going to push down on it, and it's going to be a negative factor. And it seems like there's always those negative factors, whether it's something that's in the market or something that comes out of left field. But let's look at the board for last week. February live cattle futures. Monday was President's Day. Tuesday was up 60. Wednesday down 12. Thursday down $1.20. And Friday down 37 cents. Ending the week at 119.72, which was down $1.10 for the week. April ended the week at 118.25, down $2.07. You look at your feeder cattle. Monday, of course, was President's Day and the board was shut down, and that helped your cash markets with the board being closed on Monday. They didn't have anything to worry about. They had an up day the Friday before, and so they were able to take advantage of big gains in your Monday feeder cattle auctions, and then it continued as your board was up most of the week on feeder cattle. Tuesday was up 77 cents, Wednesday up $1.47, Thursday up 2 cents, Friday off 60 cents with some profit taken, but still your March feeder cattle contract ended the week at 140.20, up $1.68. That's a good gain there. April ended at 142.10, up 73 cents. Your fat cattle trade through Thursday, they had sold 64,600 head. That's how much we're probably going to, there wasn't a whole lot of trade on Friday, so probably going to be around 70,000 for the week. And that's just not a high enough percentage. We was asking how much do we ask if we're going to require a minimum amount of negotiated cash trade, and you ask for 50%, which you're never going to get, and try to keep 30, 25, 20 at the least. We've been around 20% for a long time, but we can't even get 20% negotiated cash trade anymore. But your market. And like I told you, you look at the board, I told you here last week that we were likely going to get into a pattern where fat cattle and feeders were going to go in opposite directions. And we saw losses on our fat cattle board. We saw gains on the feeder cattle board. The market was kind of tough, even though we gained $1 on fat cattle, but feeder cattle were sharply higher. But your trade was 117 to 121 on all your sales of fat steers and heifers through the week in your 5 area negotiated trade area, but it was mostly 120 everywhere. And early to midweek, we saw the Southern Plains trade at 120. We were a little bit disappointed in that because your feeder cattle were selling better, your board was a little better early in the week, and we thought maybe they could get back to 121 after losing the $2 the week before. But they were able to get back to 120, and then your northern feedlot areas, they thought that they did not sell any cattle early week. They thought they'd wait till later in the week and they would be able to gain more ground. But then when the board collapsed there on Thursday, then we knew that they weren't going to get it, and they ended up having to mostly take the 120 also, and didn't gain any ground on the dress trade. But your live steer weighted average through Thursday was at 119.77. Like I said, most all your trades were at 120, and that was a buck higher. So even though it was a disappointing trade, you did gain a little bit of ground. Your dress trade ranged from 190 to 191, very narrow range. Mostly all at 190. That was steady to mostly a buck higher, for their live sales. But no, on the dress sales, it was steady exactly at 190. And in fact, your dress steers had a weighted average in your 5-area feeding region of 190.10. A little bit of cleanup trade on Friday in the northern areas, about 5,200 in Iowa and about 1,600 in Nebraska. Still at 120. And there was mostly 119 on the few live sales they had in Nebraska. So didn't end on a good note on our fat cattle. Box beef cutout values, your weighted average for last week on your trades were in your choice 205.71. That was down $1.81 from the weighted average from the previous week. Your week's average on select trades 202.99, down $1.62 from the previous week. Choice select spread on the weighted average was $2.72, and a pretty swift movement of 683 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. We're starting to get more orders in, making sure these supermarkets, meat markets, even your food service, everybody is wanting to make sure they've got plenty of product on hand, because it looks like we're getting an early spring, and it's unbelievable how nice the weather's been in a lot of places. Your slaughter for the week last week, 628,000, 8,000 more than the same week the year before, and only 581,000 for the year before. So a significant improvement there. Look at your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index with DV auction ended the week at 141.66, gaining $2 to $3 there, and that was the significance. You saw all your sales were higher. I think we saw the big gains last week, so don't be surprised if your Monday auctions aren't a little bit cheaper, because they're going to be compared to those big gains that we saw a week ago when we didn't have a board open, and we're coming off the big gains the previous Friday. So likely your trends are going to be lower on your auctions this week, but you shouldn't let it bother you. I mean, it's compared to the sharply higher market from last week. But Joplin Regional Stockyards, they're going to be starting early on Monday here, and they've got 9,000 head for sale. They'll be moving through the ring in Joplin, so you can get on dvauction.com and view and bid on that sale right there. But your cash feeders last week, your feeder cattle, a lot of them are big calves, but your feeder cattle going right into the feedlot, $4 to $6 higher last week in your auctions. Your stocker cattle and lightweight calves, $4 to $14 higher. And people are really, really getting aggressive. And it had to be partly due to the nice weather that was around. You could feel spring in the air. I tell you what, been up here in Montana and shirt sleeve weather during the day, guys. Cools down at night, but pretty darn nice. But your stocker cattle are just getting hot as we're getting grass fever already, and a lot of you are still looking at snow on the ground. But the condition of these cattle is everything, and these hard wintered, thinner type cattle are really, really hot right now. And you take somebody that's not in the cattle business and into the sale this time of year, and they see those fat, pretty calves come through, and you think that they would bring the top market, and they don't sell near as well as those hard, rugged looking calves. and those are the ones that have compensatory gain, meaning that when you get them to where they're going and start giving them everything that they want to eat, or they get some green grass here in the next several weeks, they're going to really put that gain on because they've got to build body condition back up. And so that is going to be the cheapest gain you can get anywhere. And guys are willing to give a big price for them, knowing that they're going to get that compensatory gain. But was that the talk that I gave on Saturday night was at Pay's Public Auction Yards in Billings, Montana. And of course I got to give a talk, but I do that all the time. That's not that big a deal. But I did get to sell some items and auctioneer from the block at one of the most historic auction markets in the world. Pay's public auction yards there had the first ring scale, first video auction, just a big deal there at Pay's, and it tickled me to death to get to auction off some items there that were donated to raise money. And I got to do it with my friend Justin Tupper from St. Ann, South Dakota, has the market there. But the day before, on Friday, Pay's had a heck of a sale. 5,000 head on offer. They had a big horse sale at Billings Live outside of town there, and I tell you what, just a lot going on in Billings, Montana. But look at this string of thin stocker type 6-weight cattle in Pay's. You think they're not paying for compensatory gain? Look at this long string. 368 head of 634-pound thin steer calves bring $176.50 at Public Auction Yards, Billings, Montana. Fort Scott, Kansas, Fort Scott Livestock Market. This is on Saturday, guys, and a big long string for them. Some heavyweight feeders that have been kind of hard to sell, but got along pretty good with them on Saturday in Fort Scott. 278 head of 888-pound steers bring $136.25, and they had a big sale on Friday in Crawford, Nebraska at Crawford Livestock Market, including this string of Red Angus replacement quality heifers from Abbott Land and Cattle Company there. 124 head of these fancy red ladies, 751 pounds, $164.75. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.